Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Eleecia Myers. Let me tell you a little bit about Eleecia. She specializes in working with children, young adults, and families of diverse sizes and backgrounds. Her approach incorporates solution focused therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Her experience includes many years of service at an infant mental health psychiatric clinic, as well as counseling children and families in such areas as reunification, stabilization, and adoption. Eleecia, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you?
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am good, thank you. Like I said, I'm honored that you're here. So, Alicia, tell us a little bit about yourself. What was that journey like to get here to today? What was
Mhm.
that aha moment for you?
So I always, when working with kiddos and families, I always say, what's the why behind what's happening? What's the why behind the behavior? What's the why behind, the reason coming to counseling? So I guess I'll share a little bit about my why behind. So my why behind coming into counseling specifically around reunification, adoption, just stabilization in general would be my parents divorcing and having that safe space, which was counseling for me.
Mhm.
Um, so having that person that I was able to talk to I wasn't team mom, I wasn't team dad. That person became my why behind why I love working with kiddos and families, and specifically in regards to unification.
Mhm. Oh, okay. No, that's great. And I want to touch base on each of those topics. Let's say I'm calling time reunification, stabilization, and adoption. So for
Mhm.
me, Alicia, I grew up with my grandparents, and I didn't get a chance to grow up with my mom, and dad.
Mhm.
Now, I was pretty much from day one when I was born. I grew up with my grandparents, but I had a little resentment of why wasn't I, with them. Anyway, it was until years and years later that my mom explained what happened. Okay, satisfactory. I was cool, but I
Mhm.
always felt I didn't have any unification with my siblings. It wasn't 2 years later because I felt like I was the only child. But
Mhm.
over the last 4, 5, 6 years, even before that, but more so lately, we've been closer. We talk to each other at least once or twice a week. There's three of us. The fourth one, unfortunately, she kind of kept her distance from us. Okay, what happened. Then I had a brother that was here younger than me. He passed away, but my
Mhm.
mom had another relationship, and it's my half brother, and I try to keep in contact with him.
Mhm.
So that's my story because I wanted you to know where I was and how where I didn't feel like I didn't have any stability, um, reunification, if I know what that means of getting together. That happened later on. So if you could touch base on each, let's go with reunification, and how does that come into play, and what does it really mean?
Okay, so the first I want to define what reunification counseling is. So
Yeah.
reunification counseling is reunifying the child with the parent that has not been an active member in that child's life, right?
Mm.
So in your situation, mom was not the most active person in your life, and then grandparents were the primary caregivers.
Right.
In that specific situation, I'm using and go off of that. I would, for one, get background information from your parents or caregivers at that time, so grandparents, and also grandmother as well. So from that, kind of doing a timeline. Okay, well, this is what happened before even the inner utero experience, right? That's all a part of the reunification process. So we start off with the timeline. Okay, well, this happened, which led to ultimately him not being with us full time. Once that happens and I identify who mom was and just kind of the struggles, building my own therapeutic relationship with her, and also on the other end, building a therapeutic relationship with you as well. So with that being said, once I have both of you guys and built a rapport of some sort, we can start off with something as simple as letters if you haven't had any communication with that kiddo. And we can kind of, for one, identify emotions first, right? You have to tell me, depending on the age, you may know like all the emotions. But if I'm dealing with a younger kiddo, I have to do emotion identification. This is how I feel when this came up, X, Y, and Z, right?
Mm.
So, for instance, I've started before with just a letter. Okay, this is a letter that dad wrote to us. Then you can have the option to write back, different things like that. And we start from something as small as a letter to voice calls if you are scared of the presence of them. So voice calls, so it's kind of like we're doing, right?
Yeah.
We're on Zoom, the videos are off. I kind of meet with the kiddo beforehand. And then we move slowly but surely move towards doing face-to-face, virtual, different things like that. So it's not a short process. It's more of a long process because we want to make sure that for one, I'm always going to be team kiddo to make sure that they're in the best position. And we're always making sure that their emotions and their feelings are heard. So being that voice in that situation. So that's a little bit about reunification counseling, which is basically placing in a therapeutic way, um, mending that relationship, that attachment, big piece that came up, attachment with the kiddo and the parent that has been displaced from their life.
Okay. You know, and I was thinking, if she had the pressure of getting married, of having kids at such an early age, because I look at it, because I also talked to my sisters about this. She wasn't around. Well, she was around, but not parenting. If I'm making sense. And I
Mhm.
look at it that I know I came out a little bit like that because I don't have any kids, and I think I only tried once to have kids, and I was in my 40s. Now I'm early 60s, and I don't have any regrets of not having kids. I'm not sorry, this way you know. But I
Mhm.
think if my mom was born at the same, let's say in my era in the 60s instead of in the 40s, I think she probably wouldn't have kids. Or maybe if she was born even later. Because I just see, as I started putting together, her life and getting to know the stories, she
Mhm.
loved to come and go as she pleased,
Yeah.
come home. That's how I figure. I think I came out that way, even though at times I do would like to have a family, but I
Mhm.
have extended friends that I call family. So this way you get a background of like how my mother was, and
Mhm.
how does stabilization come into play, because I felt I didn't have any stability growing up, not until I was maybe in my 20s, and my grandfather was at a later age, and we started having communication more. That's when I started feeling that I had a little bit of stability. But that was in my late teens, early 20s.
Okay. When we think about stabilization, we think about three important parts, right? So there's safety, regulation, and predictability.
Mm,
So I'll break all three of those down. The basic needs of life have to be met for the kiddo for them to have a appropriate response, I would say, right?
mm,
Because I'm pretty sure you've heard of flight or fight mode, or have you flipped your lid before? If I don't have the basic necessities such as water, food, shelter, etc., right? Then I'm automatically most times going to be in fight mode.
mhm,
So that safety piece is your grandparents they provided that safe piece. You knew you had somewhere to go home to at night. You knew you could talk to someone. You knew you had your basic needs met. So if the kiddos' basic needs are met, that's one of the biggest things when it comes to like stabilization and reunification in general. And the second one is regulation. So that goes back to the emotion identification piece. So I know I think I mentioned this a little bit, but I was primarily just work with children and families, right?
right.
Mostly children. Um, and the first thing that I do, whether this kiddo is 3 years old or this kiddo is around 18 years old, we're going to come up with, do you know what this emotion means? How do you feel about this emotion? And we do it in a fun way. We're not sitting on the couch doing different things. We're playing Uno, we're doing Jenga, all these different things to kind of say like, okay, I understand what this emotion means and I'm able to verbalize it. Um, in a comfortable way. So that's kind of the second piece, the regulation piece. I'm able to say how I feel, but also use coping skills to regulate once that trauma response or that fight or flight mode option comes up. So regulation. And lastly, predictability. Um, there's different reunification cases that I've had where, there's mom gets kiddo this weekend, dad gets kiddo this weekend. Once that child gets in the rhythm of, okay, well, I know I'm with mom the first and third weekend, and I know I'm with dad the second and fourth weekend, that becomes kind of like nature. Like they're sponges, right? They're gonna automatically know I'm going here, I'm going there. Of course, sometimes it gets tricky with parenting plans, different things like that. But predictability is having a schedule in place for the kiddos and also following through. So that helps with that fight or flight mode, that emotion identification, and also sets tone for the future as well. So I hope I answered that
No,
question.
no, you did. And the thing is, right, when it comes to let's say reunification and getting if the couples are divorced and now you have them co-parenting, if one of them starts dating,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now, oh, wait a minute, I can't, I hate to say that, I can't have the kid this week. Can I have him next week? Because I'm going on a date. So how does that come into play? How do you help, you know, in terms of getting that stability with the kids and the let's say the parents co-parenting, because now
Mm-hmm.
one of them wants to date or both of them are now dating.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually I have dealt with that before. And I think the biggest piece when it comes to this is, and I say this all the time, I am not team mom, I am not team dad, I am team kiddo. What is best for team kiddo? And if they're asking, okay, well, Eleecia, I have a date with my boyfriend, my new boyfriend this weekend, but he can only come in town this weekend. But I know I have the kiddos this day. Do you think I can cancel it? I would always recommend, for one, putting yourself in the kiddo's shoes. If you know that they don't even have to know what it is, like what you're counseling it for. How would you feel if you were being counseled on, especially if it was a fresh divorce or you know that your schedule so far? So kind of putting yourself in that kiddo's shoes. It is a tricky way to navigate. Once you get into that parenting and the parents dating, different things like that, co-parenting and the parents dating separate people. But I always say, like, if you have that schedule in place, try to stick to it as much as possible. And it's sometimes we may have times where, okay, well, I can't do this. A work event came up, or I have to do something with time within that specific time range. Then there's also something that most parenting plans called the right of refusal.
Mhm.
So, in the right of refusal is that your co-parent has the right to accept that parenting time that you don't want at that time or refuse. So they get the first right of refusal most times, and then after that, extended family gets brought in. And that's a lot of families get in trouble for that, and they also it's helpful as well because some co-parents don't communicate. I've had some of the best co-parenting situations where they're able to be in the same room together. I've also had some co-parenting situations where I have to schedule them on different days, different weeks, make sure that, and and I try to be the middleman in that situation, but not overstep. But I've seen it on both ways of the spectrum.
Alicia, there was one story I wanted to tell you because I remember this is years ago. A friend of mine had custody of both of his sons, and
Mhm.
the kids were maybe 10, 11, 12, 10. I can't remember the exact ages, but they weren't teenagers. So he broke up with his, I don't know if he ever got married to her, but let's say if that was his ex-wife. She
Mhm.
had come back maybe a few years later and wanted to take one of the kids to live with her. Now, the brothers, they grew up together. They
Mhm.
were always together and all that. And so I overstepped my boundaries, I feel, but my friend was kind enough to not take offense to what I said. But I said, listen, I don't have any kids, but I don't think you should separate them. And for
Mhm.
her to take one and not the other, how is that fair? So I wanted to talk about that, at least. Like, you're not reunifying anyone because you're taking one and not the other. Has that ever came into your field that they wanted to take one and not the other? How would that feel for the kid that's not chosen?
I think that would be harmful a little bit for the kiddo that is not chosen, right?
Right.
And I say this all the time. We're working and we're healing our inner child with how we're parenting our children right now,
Hmm.
right? So this is a pattern of, okay, if you take this one kiddo, unless it's like dire circumstances, for example, I've had extreme cases where kiddos are having big behavior issues. And that parent is struggling with, trying to keep up with the behavior, all those different things, X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, let me send them somewhere else that I know they can be better supported. That's a different one. If you're
Hmm.
just saying, okay, well, I need to just go get this kiddo because I think they'll be a better fit over here, and leave the other kiddo, then how, once again, putting ourselves in that kiddo's shoes, how would you feel? Especially being an only child to, well, going from having a sibling to being an only child, I do think that would be harmful because once again, we're healing that inner child that we don't want to heal in the future as we use our parenting, right?
Yeah.
So then it goes into like the dating piece you were saying, okay, well, my own dad didn't want me or my own stepdad didn't want me. And so now this man or this woman isn't going to want me in the future. So it's just patterns that we don't want to start. So I do agree with you're saying a little bit that, keeping them together would be helpful. But we're in a day of 2026 at this point. There's technology, there's flights, all these different things where they can still have a relationship with that sibling or that and make it work as much as possible.
Yeah,
But
it's funny because back in you hit on the head because back in it might have been 2005. I can't even remember how long ago it was, but I know there were like kids. I don't. Yeah, we didn't even have cell phones then. So
yeah.
now, like I said, with technology, you could text each other, you could FaceTime each other, you could Zoom each other. So that's true. That's It's a different ball game now. So when does adoption come into play? Is it if a one parent is not available or they don't want to have uh, any closest with the kid, if that makes sense, or a parent is deceased? How does adoption come into play? How do you help out in that situation?
I'll give you, I guess, maybe some examples or some scenarios of
Yeah.
adoption within the past. So, for one, working with the foster care system.
Mhm.
So I've had my previous career was working closely with Department of Children and Family Services and specifically just working on reunifying them.
Yeah.
And when we're unifying them, you not only have to go through like counseling, you have to go through parenting classes, you have to go through specific drug screens, specific court hearings. And if that parent, once again, going back to those basic needs,
Yeah.
if those parents can't meet those basic needs for themselves and they're struggling with that, it's hard for them to go to scheduled visitations at DFACS all the time, go to make sure that they're paying their child support because they still have to pay child support when they're in the
Right.
foster care system. So after, I think, if I'm, don't quote me on this, but after a year, if your child is in the foster care system for about a year, then they're eligible for adoption. And I've seen cases where the parent is struggling, not only on the financial piece, but just different areas I just spoke about, where they sometimes lost custody or sometimes said, you know what, I see that this child is thriving in this foster family. Let me go ahead and give them up for adoption. So that's one of the big cases that I've seen. Another piece is, and I'll talk a little bit about my own life personally.
Mhm.
Uh, my brother's dad, my stepbrother's biological dad was not in the picture, right? And my dad married my stepmom, and my stepbrother came along with him. Him not being in the picture, he paid child support, lived in a different state or whatever. My dad then had the opportunity to adopt my stepbrother, and he became a part of the Myers clan, as we would say. So
Okay.
that's a piece when it comes to adoption. And also just the traditional one, like the open and closed adoptions at birth. Have a couple of cases where, and this is something I see a lot. Also is we have children of different races being adopted by families of different races,
Yeah.
right?
I've seen that too. Yeah.
I've worked with a few families like that, and that's a piece where they also come into counseling, like, hey, I'm working with this. African American child. I don't identify as African American. They look different than us. How can we build that attachment with them? And this can be an open adoption, this could be a closed adoption. What it looks like in an open adoption is that foster family is still engaging with the bio mom or bio dad in that situation, and making sure that they still have a relationship. So that's another piece of adoption. Like I've given up my rights, but I still want to be involved. And when you give up your rights as the parent, as the biological parent, the open adoption piece is very weird. Like the laws around that are very, very and it's kind of like it's up to the adoptive parents to say like how often you can come, how often you can communicate, different things like that. So those are three big examples that I see all the time, in regards to adoption. There could be other areas, but those are three that I'm very familiar with.
No, that's good to know. And I wanted to touch base on one more topic, going back to adoption. I've seen on Instagram and on YouTube Shorts where a stepfather comes
Mhm.
in and adopts, their stepchild. If that makes sense.
What I was
Um,
saying.
yeah, right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what happened to my brother.
Okay,
My the stepfather, and I had my stepbrother. So he adopted him, changed his last name,
right.
different and it I don't know the legal reasoning behind that, but what I can say is he changed his last name to Myers. And he also was able to, have rights. So say for instance you had to something as simple as a permission slip. My dad could sign that permission slip, or if he had to take him to the doctor, my dad could sign that permission slip. And that sometimes that process is more formal, where they go in front of a judge, different things like that. Sometimes it just happens. And I've been a part of different like ceremonies with judges where they do the big adoption ceremony and do you accept this being a part of the family? And sometimes it's just, the way of life. I've raised you since you were XY age, and now I'm going to go ahead and, make this legal. And a lot of, and I've seen Instagram videos where it was this one young lady, her stepfather raised her whole life, and she had her dad's last name up until graduation. As she walked across the stage, she officially had changed documents to say, okay, he has adopted me. He found out as she was walking across the stage that she changed her last name.
Wow.
So it's definitely situations like that, and I was able to be a part of one. And I think for one, it's a legal part of it, but it's also emotional piece too, because I
Yeah.
think I feel I can call you mom, I can call you dad. I don't have to call you that specifically. There's different names as we all know. Like I heard S mom, stepmom,
Yeah.
different things like that. But it just makes I think it helps with the family piece a little bit as well. Because how would you feel if everyone else's last name was four of us was Myers, and you're the only one walking around with a different name. So it kind of helps with that emotional piece for the kid as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree 100%. So first of all, Alicia, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really appreciate it. And before I let you go, anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to promote?
Um, nothing specifically, but we are in Atlanta, so I know we as in our practice. So I'm a part of Key Counseling Group.
Okay.
Um, I am one of about 10 therapists. So we see people from geriatric age to from about 3 years old, postpartum, different things like that. We're in 4 locations. Near Punt City Market, so Piedmont Park, Decatur, Georgia, Roswell, Georgia, and also Virginia Highlands. So that is one thing I guess I will promote, is our group, Key Counseling Group, that I am very happy to be a part of.
And what's that website?
KeyCounselingGroupATL.com.
No, I
And
definitely put that on the show notes. Yeah, what was the other one? I lost you for a second.
so it's Key Counseling Group at ATL.com. And then you can also follow us on Instagram. And we're trying to get like more popular on TikTok now. We've been making some silly TikToks. So follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and also the website as well, where you also get a free 30-minute consultation to see if that therapist is a good fit for you. And I always encourage people to do that because it's free. Why not?
Yeah, no, I'll definitely put that in the show notes. And before I let you go, one last word about family.
Mhm. I think my was okay. For one, I would say two different things. The for one, there's no perfect parenting.
Mhm.
The second thing is kids do well if they can. And the last thing I had wrote this down was different things happen because all these different things happen because something, no, let me change it up. Sorry. Healing and reunification doesn't happen because everything goes right. It happened because someone stays calm, consistent, and connected when things go wrong. Hopefully, I said that right. Did I
Yeah.
help you?
No, no, definitely. And again, Eleecia, thank you so much for being on People Are Dating. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll talk to you
All
soon.
right. Bye bye.